The flickering distress beacon was their last hope. The Talaxians, ravaged by the Cathar onslaught, had sent a desperate plea across the galaxy, a plea only one species would heed: humanity. Some called it compassion, others naivete, still others a reckless disregard for intergalactic law. Whatever the reason, humanity often answered when others turned away, their ships venturing into the void where even the most seasoned mercenaries feared to tread. Far removed from the galactic stage, nestled in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness, Dr. Ryan Taylor adjusted the lamp over his makeshift operating table. The clinic, a converted Quonset hut, smelled of antiseptic and pine. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the corrugated metal walls, a constant reminder of the isolation he craved. He stitched a gash on old man Hemlock's leg, a souvenir from a run-in with a particularly grumpy moose. Hemlock grunted in pain, but Ryan's hands were steady, his movements precise. Years of combat medicine had honed his skills he now used to patch up frostbite and mend broken bones in this forgotten corner of the world. Flashback, a split-second image. A burning ship, alien screams, Ryan's face smeared with blood and regret. The words echo in his mind. I couldn't save them. The satellite phone buzzed, an unwelcome intrusion. He recognized the encrypted signature immediately, a legacy from his past life. It was a coded message from Colonel Eva Rostova, his former commanding officer, now buried deep within the Earth Defense Force intelligence apparatus. He hadn't heard from her in years. Ryan finished the stitch, snipped the thread, and slapped a bandage onto Hemlock's leg. All done, Silas. Try to avoid any further altercations with the local wildlife, eh? Hemlock chuckled, a wet, rattling sound. Always a pleasure, Doc. Ryan retreated to his small office, the scent of ozone and old electronics hanging heavy in the air. He decrypted the message. The Talaxians. Their distress call had been intercepted, deemed too risky by most, buried under layers of bureaucratic red tape. But Eva knew Ryan. She knew he wouldn't ignore it. He stared at the grainy image attached to the message, a Talaxian refugee ship, its hull breached and scarred, adrift in the blackness. The plea was simple, desperate: Cathar invasion, critical systems failing, require immediate assistance, coordinates attached. Ryan ran a hand through his thinning hair. He'd buried that life, the life of a hero, a soldier. He was a doctor now. He saved people one at a time in a place where the galaxy couldn't touch him. He almost deleted the message, his finger hovering over the screen. Almost. But the image of the ravaged ship, the desperation in the Talaxian plea, it stirred something within him, a sense of duty, guilt. He wasn't sure. The coordinates pinpointed a remote sector, relatively close to Earth's solar system, but far enough to be considered uncharted territory. The risks were immense. The Cathar were ruthless, relentless, and he was just one man with a rusty spacecraft and a past that haunted him. He leaned back in his chair, the Alaskan wind howling outside. He was no longer the soldier he once was. Years of peace had softened him, but could he truly stand by and do nothing? With a sigh, Ryan opened a hidden compartment beneath his desk, revealing a cache of old military gear, a battered flight suit, a pulse rifle, a worn medkit. He began gathering supplies, his movements slow, deliberate. He checked the oxygen tanks, calibrated the navigation system on his aging Cessna, a heavily modified aircraft capable of interstellar travel. He paused at the doorway, looking out at the vast, snow-covered wilderness. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist. It was a harsh, unforgiving land, but it was his home. He might never see it again. With a deep breath, Ryan climbed into the cockpit, the familiar smell of oil and metal filling his nostrils. He fired up the engines, the roar echoing through the valley. The aircraft taxied onto the makeshift runway, its lights cutting through the swirling snow. Then, with a surge of power, Ryan Taylor's aircraft launched into the stormy Alaskan sky, climbing towards the heavens. setting a course for the stars and the unknown danger that awaited. The aircraft shuddered violently as it tore through the last vestiges of Earth's atmosphere, the sky outside dissolving from a brilliant, blinding blue to the absolute, unwavering black of space. A final jolt, then a sudden, disorienting sensation of weightlessness pressed Ryan into his seat. He was through. "All right, let's see what we've got," he muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the cramped cockpit. His fingers danced across the control panel, initiating a cascade of system checks. Green lights flickered to life, then a few stubbornly remained orange. Damn it. The navigation system was showing minor malfunctions, likely caused by the enthusiastic modifications he'd made to the aircraft. Nothing critical, but enough to be a nuisance. He sighed, leaning back in his seat. Time for some old-fashioned piloting. With a few deft keystrokes, he bypassed the automated systems and rerouted his course manually, relying on his ingrained knowledge of astrophysics and the star charts projected onto his visor. It was riskier but faster. Suddenly, a warning klaxon blared, bathing the cockpit in red light. Debris field detected. Ryan gripped the controls, his eyes scanning the space ahead. Jagged chunks of metal, remnants of some long-ago space battle, tumbled lazily through the void. He weaved the aircraft through the treacherous field, his hands moving with practiced ease. A miscalculation, a moment's inattention, and he'd be vaporized. The claustrophobic environment of the cockpit, the constant hum of the life support systems, the ever-present threat of death. It all triggered something deep inside him. A flash of memory, the sterile white walls of a med bay, the frantic beeping of monitors, the lifeless eyes of a young soldier staring up at him. The failed rescue mission, the faces of those he couldn't save. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting to suppress the memories. "Focus, Taylor," he growled, his nucleus tightening as he gripped the controls. "They need you, the Talaxians need you." He took a deep breath, forcing the images back into the dark recesses of his mind. A faint ping echoed through the cockpit. Energy signatures detected. Ryan frowned, studying the readings on his sensor panel. The signatures were weak, distant, but definitely there. Cathar patrols. He'd hoped to avoid them. "Stealth it is," he murmured, activating the aircraft's cloaking system. He reduced power to the engine, slowing his speed and minimizing his energy output. He'd have to slip past them undetected. Every nerve ending was on high alert as he executed a series of evasive maneuvers, using the debris field as cover. Then, another alarm, this one more urgent. A high-pitched whine filled the cockpit. Oxygen recycling system malfunction. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at the oxygen levels displayed on his console, dropping fast. He had maybe 20 minutes of breathable air left. Son of a... He ripped open a maintenance panel, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. He quickly assessed the damage, his mind racing. The primary recycling unit was fried. He had no replacement parts. He would have to improvise. Drawing on his medical knowledge and his rudimentary engineering skills, he began jury-rigging a temporary fix, scavenging parts from other systems, and using medical tape to hold everything together. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked feverishly, his fingers moving with a speed born of desperation. Just as his vision began to blur, the makeshift system sputtered to life. The oxygen levels stabilized, then slowly began to rise. He slumped back in his seat, gasping for breath. Too damn close. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled through the comm system, followed by a garbled voice. "Mayday, Talaxian vessel, critical damage, Cathar, attack." The transmission was fragmented, barely audible. It cut out abruptly, leaving only silence. He frowned. The signal was weak, corrupted, but he'd heard enough. They were in bad shape. The transmission also mentioned something about the Talaxians' communication systems being specifically incompatible with most standard receivers, but that humanity's older systems were capable of patching through. That's why they had reached out. He pushed the engines to full power, adjusting his course towards the Talaxian coordinates. As he approached, a massive shape loomed out of the darkness. The Talaxian vessel. It was far worse than he had imagined. Large sections of the hull were missing, exposing twisted metal and flickering sparks. Life support systems were failing, evidenced by the ghostly plumes of atmosphere venting into space. Internal fires raged, casting eerie shadows across the ship's ravaged surface. He initiated the docking sequence, guiding his aircraft towards the designated port. The magnetic clamps engaged with a metallic clang, sealing the two vessels together. Emergency protocols initiated. He grabbed his medkit and a pulse rifle, checking the power levels. He saw large, gaping holes in the Talaxian ship, edges melted and blackened. Energy weapons. Whatever had hit them hard. Then through a nearby comm system, he heard voices frantic, high-pitched, speaking in a language he didn't understand, but the raw terror in their tone was universal. He took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. He didn't know what he was about to face, but he was ready. He slung the medkit over his shoulder, gripped the pulse rifle tightly, and activated the airlock. It was time to see what he could do. Ryan squeezed through the breached entry point, the distorted metal groaning under his weight. Inside, chaos reigned. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across the alien metal, illuminating sparking wires that spat venomous blue arcs. The air hung thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burning polymers, stinging his nostrils. His boots slipped on a slick of viscous fluid coating the deck, forcing him to grab a nearby conduit to steady himself. He pushed further into the vessel, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. A cluster of figures huddled near a damaged support beam, their forms alien and unsettling. They were Talaxians, their chitinous skin a patchwork of greens and browns. Multiple limbs, thin and wiry, were wrapped around each other as if seeking comfort. Large, multifaceted eyes like polished obsidian stared back at him, wide with fear and pain. Ryan reached for his medical scanner, a familiar comfort in this alien nightmare. He swept the device over the nearest Talaxian, a young one with a weeping laceration on its carapace. The scanner beeped erratically, displaying a jumble of unintelligible symbols. Frustration tightened his jaw. The Talaxian's medical technology was utterly incompatible. He lowered the scanner, forcing himself to rely on his training, his instincts. He knelt beside the injured Talaxian, his fingers gently probing the wound. Burns mottled the chitin around the laceration, and he could feel the rapid, shallow thrum of its multiple hearts beneath his fingertips. Internal trauma, definitely. Probably from some kind of energy weapon. Easy, he murmured, knowing they wouldn't understand. He needed to communicate somehow. He tried speaking slowly, deliberately. "I'm a doctor. I want to help." The Talaxians recoiled, their multifaceted eyes widening further. Their language, when it came, was a series of clicks, whistles, and guttural sounds that resonated deep in his chest, utterly alien, completely incomprehensible. He tried again, this time using universal medical symbols. He pointed to the red cross on his medkit, then mimed bandaging a wound. He gestured towards the injured Talaxian, then pointed to himself, indicating that he was a healer. A figure detached itself from the group, moving with a cautious grace that belied the surrounding chaos. It was another Talaxian, taller than the others, its posture radiating authority. This one observed him with a calculating intensity, its large eyes narrowed with suspicion. A network of fine scars traced patterns across its chitinous face, but one stood out, a jagged, disfiguring mark that ran from its forehead to its mandible, pulling its features into a permanent grimace. The Talaxian spoke, its voice raspy and accented, but the words were clear. "Human, why are you here? What do you want?" Ryan stood, meeting its gaze. "My name is Ryan. I received your distress call. I'm here to help." "Help?" The Talaxian's voice dripped with skepticism. "We did not expect this. A human, why should we trust you?" "I'm a doctor," Ryan repeated, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I can see you're injured. Let me help you." I am Thea, the Talaxian said, its voice softening slightly. I am the ship's engineer. We have sustained critical damage from a Cathar attack. She gestured around the wreck compartment. As you can see, we are compromised. Ryan's gaze flickered to the scar on Thea's face, a silent testament to the brutality of the attack and the trauma she had endured. I need to assess the damage, Ryan said, his voice firm. I need access to your engineering systems. Thea hesitated, her multifaceted eyes studying him intently. Why should I grant you access? You are an unknown quantity. I do not trust you. Because, Ryan said, meeting her gaze unflinchingly, you don't have any other choice. Thea considered his words, her mandibles clicking softly. Finally, she nodded curtly. Very well, I will grant you limited access, but you will be monitored. Arcturian, she called to one of the uninjured Talaxians, accompany the human. See that he does not stray. Ryan nodded, accepting the condition. He followed Thea through the damaged corridors, Arcturian's unwavering gaze fixed on his back. The ship's core was located deep within the vessel, a tangled mess of alien technology. Breaches scarred the containment field, allowing dangerous radiation to leak into the surrounding compartments. Power conduits, thick as his arm, were severed and sparking, their energy arcing wildly. He ran his hand along a cracked panel, feeling the residual heat radiating from within. This is bad, he said, his voice grim. How long before the core fails? Thea's voice was tight with anxiety. We estimate less than an hour. The containment field is collapsing. The power conduits are failing without immediate repairs. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Catastrophic failure, he finished for her. Everyone on board. He turned to Thea, his expression serious. We need to stabilize the core, now. Thea shook her head, her mandibles clicking in distress. We lack the necessary replacement parts. Our communication systems are damaged. We can only send messages to short distances using human technology. We are trapped. Ryan thought quickly, his mind racing. I have a ship, he said, with a functioning power supply. We can use it as a temporary backup, stabilize the core, and buy us time to make repairs. Thea stared at him, her multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief. Use human technology to stabilize a Talaxian core, that is unheard of. It's our only chance, Ryan said, his voice urgent. Do you want to live or do you want to die? Thea hesitated, her internal conflict evident in her posture. Finally, she nodded, a flicker of something that might have been trust in her eyes. Very well, human, do what you can. But know this, if you fail, we all die. Ryan began threading the heavy power cable, its human-made clamps sparking against the smooth, bioluminescent surface of the Talaxian vessel. The air crackled with ozone and the faint, metallic scent of alien coolant. He tightened a coupling, the ratchet clicking in the echoing silence of the cargo bay. Thea observed from a raised platform, her three eyes narrowed, her scarred face etched with skepticism. That gauge reads 5 microvolts off spec. Human tolerances are generous. Ryan grunted, tightening another bolt. Generous is one word for it. Another is field expedient. My tech isn't exactly designed to play nice with your elegant architecture. We're pushing the limits here, Thea. Indeed. She tapped a control panel, the holographic display shimmering with complex equations. The core matrix is volatile. Our energy source is unlike anything you've likely encountered. Crystalline resonance, highly unstable if improperly stimulated. Ryan ran a diagnostic, his fingers flying across the makeshift interface panel he'd cobbled together. Understood, which is why I'm babying this connection, slow and steady. We overload that matrix and this whole eggshell goes supernova. Thea descended from the platform, her prosthetic leg whirring softly. Supernova would be an optimistic outcome. A cascade failure is more likely. A chain reaction that will consume us all. Ryan initiated the power transfer. A low hum vibrated through the deck plates, growing steadily louder. He watched the energy levels on his monitor, his brow furrowed in concentration. Tiny adjustments, a fraction of a degree at a time. The Talaxian systems flickered, sputtered, then stabilized. A series of green lights bloomed across Thea's control panel. A collective sigh swept through the injured Talaxians huddled in the makeshift infirmary. The bluish glow of the ship's internal lights intensified, chasing away the oppressive darkness. Thea approached Ryan, her expression unreadable. The life support systems are functional. For now. Your ingenuity is appreciated, Dr. Taylor. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. Just Ryan, and don't get too comfortable. This is a band-aid, not a cure. Your ship's hurting bad. He moved towards the infirmary, grabbing his medical bag. Let's see what we can do for your people. The restored life support brought a renewed energy to the Talaxian medical bay. Ryan moved with practiced efficiency, his hands gentle but firm as he assessed injuries, set broken bones, and administered medication. Thea assisted, her movements precise and economical. She anticipated his needs, handing him instruments and supplies with a silent understanding. Their eyes met briefly, a flicker of connection in the sterile environment. But Ryan sensed a wall still firmly in place. Thea was efficient, professional, but emotionally distant, guarded. He finished bandaging a young Talaxian's arm, the alien wincing but offering a weak smile. Ryan returned it, then turned to Thea. You're good at this. You know these people well. Thea's mandibles tightened. I knew them before the Cathar. Her voice was barely a whisper. My family, they were on the colony ship. No one survived. Ryan paused, his own past surfacing unbidden. He chose his words carefully. I understand loss. I've seen things I wouldn't wish on anyone. He didn't elaborate, didn't mention the botched mission, the faces of the fallen, the weight of his own guilt. Thea studied him, her three eyes assessing. You carry scars of your own, human. They are heavy. Ryan nodded, turning back to his work. He needed a distraction. Got any schematics of this bucket? I want to see what we're dealing with. Thea accessed the ship's computer, holographic blueprints swirling into existence above the central console. Structural integrity compromised in multiple sectors. Engine core containment field generator, critically damaged. Suddenly, a violent energy surge ripped through the ship. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the deck plates vibrated violently. Ryan stumbled, grabbing onto a nearby console for support. What was that? He yelled over the din. Thea consulted her readings, her expression grim. The power connection. It's overloading the energy matrix. The stabilization is failing. We're losing containment. Before Ryan could respond, Thea's voice crackled over the comm system. Dr. Taylor, secondary system failure reported in the engine room, requesting immediate assistance. And I am picking up Cathar energy signatures near the engine room. I think they are attempting a boarding. The klaxons blared, strobing red light painting the engine room in frantic pulses. Ryan grabbed the Talaxian pulse rifle Thea had provided, its unfamiliar weight settling in his hands. The cold metal was a stark contrast to the sweat already beading on his palms. Thea barked orders in Talaxian to the remaining engineers, their slender forms darting between consoles, faces etched with fear. They're adapting. Thea shouted over the din, her voice strained. Modified Talaxian stealth tech, masking their energy signatures. Standard sensors are useless. Ryan racked his brain. Human tech had its own tricks. Sound, he said, grabbing a discarded sonic emitter from a nearby workbench. We used it in urban warfare. Low-frequency sound waves to map structures. Can we adapt it to detect their movements? Thea's eyes widened, a spark of hope igniting within them. Perhaps, if we amplify the emitter and recalibrate the frequency to match their biosignatures. Quickly. Ryan worked feverishly, splicing wires and rerouting power, the acrid smell of burning circuits filling the air. Thea adjusted the emitter's settings, her fingers flying across the console. A low, almost subsonic hum filled the room. On the main screen, previously blank, a faint grid appeared, punctuated by flickering blips. There, Ryan pointed. 3 signatures. Approaching the main door. Hefting the pulse rifle, he moved towards the reinforced door, Thea flanking him. The door buckled inward with a metallic screech as focused energy weapons began to melt the metal. They had seconds. Brace! Ryan yelled. The door burst open, revealing 3 Cathar soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming in the red light. Pulse rifles spat emerald bolts ricocheting off the bulkheads. Ryan returned fire, the Talaxian weapon bucking in his hands. One of the Cathar fell, its armor breached. The other 2 pressed forward. Thea screamed as a bolt grazed her arm, searing through her protective suit. She stumbled, clutching her wound. "Thea!" Ryan yelled, pivoting to cover her. He squeezed off a burst, hitting another Cathar soldier square in the chest. It staggered back, momentarily stunned. The last Cathar lunged, its clawed hand reaching for Ryan's throat. He sidestepped the attack and slammed the butt of his rifle into the Cathar's face, the sickening crunch of bone echoing through the engine room. The alien collapsed. Silence descended, broken only by the hiss of escaping atmosphere and Thea's ragged breathing. Ryan knelt beside her, tearing open the medkit he carried. "Let me see," he said, his voice tight with concern. The wound was shallow, but cauterized flesh still smoked. He sprayed a sealant onto the burn. "It's not deep, but it needs attention. Stay here." He turned back to the door. It was a mangled mess of twisted metal and sparking wires. The containment field generator beside it flickered erratically, its hum growing weaker. "The generator. It's failing faster," Thea said, her voice weak. Ryan examined the generator. Wires were severed, conduits were melted, and the whole thing vibrated violently. "What does it do?" "It stabilizes the core," Thea explained, her face pale. "Without it, a core breach is inevitable, catastrophic." Ryan swore under his breath. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. "There has to be something we can do. What about reinforcing the field, combining human and Talaxian shielding principles?" Thea looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "It might work. But the damage is extensive, and we have limited resources." They worked together, salvaging components from damaged consoles and rerouting power conduits. Ryan, using his understanding of electromagnetic fields, helped Thea adapt human shielding techniques to the Talaxian generator. Sparks flew, and the air crackled with energy. As they worked, Ryan noticed something strange. A faint, almost imperceptible energy fluctuation within the core itself. It wasn't related to the containment field. "Thea," he said, his voice low, "I'm picking up an unusual energy signature from the core. Something's not right." Thea ran a diagnostic scan, her eyes widening in horror. "Incompatible power sources. The human energy matrix is destabilizing the Talaxian core. It's overloading." "Overloading?" Ryan asked, dread creeping into his voice. "Chain reaction," Thea said, her voice barely a whisper. "The entire ship. It will be destroyed in minutes." Ryan stared at her, his mind racing. "Can we shut it down, disconnect the human power supply?" Thea shook her head. "That will cause the life support systems to fail again. The injured, they won't survive." She pointed to a panel hidden beneath a layer of melted plasteel. "There's an emergency override. A manual activation sequence that can temporarily stabilize the core, but it requires someone to enter the core chamber." "The core chamber?" Ryan asked, already knowing the answer. "Highly radioactive," Thea confirmed, her voice trembling. "Unstable, it's a suicide mission." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Then I'll go." "No," Thea grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself. There has to be another way." "There isn't time, Thea," Ryan said, gently prying her hand away. "My medical training, the protective suit, it gives me a slightly better chance. It's all we have." He started towards the storage locker where the protective suits were kept. "Ryan, no," Thea pleaded, her voice cracking. "Don't do this." Ryan paused, turning back to face her. "I have to try. I can't let everyone die." He started to turn away. "Wait," Thea's voice was desperate. There is another way, a dangerous one." Ryan turned back, hope flickering in his chest. We could reroute the ship's auxiliary power directly into the core matrix, Thea explained, her voice tight with fear. It might stabilize the core, or it could cause a catastrophic energy surge. It's a long shot. Ryan looked at her, his expression grim. It's our only shot, let's do it. Meticulously. Ryan's fingers danced across the Talaxian interface, a series of glowing glyphs that pulsed with a faint, internal light. He traced the power lines in his mind, visualizing the flow of energy as he rerouted it through the ship's damaged systems. The air hummed with the low thrum of failing machinery, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Auxiliary feed connected, he announced, his voice tight with concentration. Diverting power now. A jolt ran through the ship, a shuddering groan of protesting metal. The lights flickered, then stabilized, burning a sickly green. Thea's voice crackled over the comm, her tone sharp with anxiety. Energy levels fluctuating. The bypass is unstable. They encountered a major obstacle, a junction twisted and blackened that needed to be bypassed manually. Damn, Ryan muttered, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. That junction's fried. We can't reroute through it remotely. I'll have to go in. Thea's response was immediate, infused with alarm. Negative. The radiation shielding is compromised. Exposure levels are critical. Ryan volunteered to enter the junction chamber despite the risk of radiation exposure. He knew they were running out of time. We don't have a choice, Thea, he said, his voice firm. If we don't bypass that junction, we lose auxiliary power completely. I'll wear a rad suit. I'll be quick. Thea reluctantly agreed, but insisted on guiding him remotely, providing technical instructions. He could hear the worry in her voice, a subtle tremor beneath the clipped, professional tone. I will monitor your vitals, she said. If your exposure reaches a critical threshold, I am pulling you out, understood? Understood, Ryan replied, already sealing himself into the protective suit. The thick material felt stifling, the recycled air stale and metallic. He moved towards the junction chamber, a small, cramped space filled with sparking wires and the acrid smell of ozone. As Ryan worked in the junction chamber, splicing cables and rerouting circuits, he experienced a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes. The radiation was already seeping through the suit, a burning sensation that crawled across his skin. Radiation levels rising, Ryan, Thea warned, her voice tight. Get it done. Ryan gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, his focus narrowed to the task at hand. He connected the final cable, a surge of power coursing through his body. Bypass complete, he gasped, stumbling back from the junction. He managed to bypass the damaged junction, but the auxiliary power conduit began to overheat, glowing a menacing red. The conduit's overheating, Thea said, her voice rising in panic. It's not designed for this level of output. Thea detected a rapidly increasing energy surge in the core matrix, exceeding critical levels. The ship groaned again, a deeper, more ominous sound this time. Energy surge in the core matrix, she announced, her voice strained. We're overloading the system. They realized that the auxiliary power was overloading the core's systems, creating a new danger. They had fixed one problem only to create another, potentially even more catastrophic. Thea attempted to regulate the power flow remotely, but her controls were unresponsive due to a power surge. I can't regulate the flow, she cried out. The surge has fried the remote controls. Ryan swore under his breath. Then we do it manually. Ryan suggested manually adjusting the power regulators within the core matrix, a highly dangerous task. Thea argued against it, her voice pleading. No, Ryan. The core matrix is even more unstable than the junction chamber. The energy fields are lethal. You can't go in there. We don't have a choice, Thea, he insisted, his voice calm despite the rising panic in his chest. If we don't regulate the power flow, the core will breach. This whole ship will become a bomb. Ryan entered the core matrix chamber, which was filled with intense energy fields and radiation. The air crackled with static electricity, the walls pulsed with an eerie blue light. The heat was intense, a suffocating wave that washed over him. He navigated the treacherous environment, following Thea's instructions to locate the power regulators. Her voice was his only guide, a lifeline in the chaotic storm of energy. "Left, 3 meters," she directed. "Careful, there's a conduit venting plasma on your right." Ryan reached the power regulators, a series of glowing dials and humming crystals. He began making adjustments, his hands trembling with exertion and fear. The energy surge intensified, the air around him shimmering with heat. The ship's alarms blared, a piercing, deafening wail that echoed through the ship as the core temperature reached critical levels. Red lights flashed, bathing the chamber in an ominous glow. Ryan struggled to maintain his focus, his vision blurring, his head pounding. The pain from the radiation was almost unbearable, but he pushed it aside, concentrating on the task at hand. Thea noticed movement on the ship's external sensors, indicating the Cathar were nearing their location. "Ryan," she said, her voice urgent. "They're here. The Cathar are approaching." Despite the chaos, Ryan managed to stabilize the power regulators, but only temporarily. The energy levels flickered, teetering on the edge of disaster. "I've stabilized the flow," he gasped, his voice ragged. "But it won't hold for long. The auxiliary conduit is about to blow." The auxiliary power conduit, a thick, snaking cable that ran along the chamber wall, began to glow ominously, pulsing with an angry red light, threatening to explode. Ryan and Thea braced for the potential explosion as the ship lurched violently, thrown sideways by an unseen force. The alarms reached a fever pitch, the lights flickered and died, plunging the core matrix chamber into darkness. The flickering console light stabilized, the emergency klaxons momentarily silenced. "Auxiliary power. Stable," Thea announced, her voice tight with exhaustion, "but the ship is still vulnerable. The power fluctuations damaged other systems. We need more time." Before Ryan could reply, Thea's fingers danced across the console. "Cathar boarding detected. They are attempting to breach the hull, sections 4 through 7. Ryan cursed. "Can we repel them?" "Negative," Thea replied grimly. "Ship's weapons are offline. The power surge fried the targeting matrix. Manual targeting is impossible with the current power levels." Ryan's mind raced. "Reroute power. Divert it from life support to the defense systems." Thea whirled on him, her scarred face contorted with anger. "Are you insane? That will kill the remaining crew. We need life support to maintain breathable air. And what good will breathable air do us when the Cathar are tearing us apart?" Ryan countered, his voice urgent. "We'll all be dead if they board this ship. A few minutes without optimal life support is better than certain death." Without waiting for her agreement, Ryan began ripping open a panel near the console, exposing a tangle of Talaxian wiring. "I saw the schematics, if I can bypass this regulator." He began splicing wires, sparks flying as he worked. The air grew noticeably thinner, a faint metallic tang filling the cramped space. Outside, the screech of metal on metal intensified. Boarding pods, shaped like grotesque insect larvae, latched onto the ship's hull with magnetic grapples. Laser torches, mounted on the pods, began to cut through the outer layers of the Talaxian vessel, showering the corridor beyond with molten slag. Ryan slammed the panel shut, sweat beading on his forehead. "Weapons should be online, but barely. Don't expect miracles." Thea tapped a series of commands into the console. A low hum vibrated through the ship as the laser cannon sputtered to life. "Cannons operational. Minimal power. They will barely scratch their armor." "It's all we've got," Ryan said grimly. "What's their boarding pattern?" Thea studied the sensor readings. "They are focusing on the most vulnerable sections of the ship, bypassing reinforced bulkheads. They know our schematics." "Then let's give them a surprise," Ryan said, a spark of steadfast perseverance in his eyes. "We lure them into a trap. The corridors are a maze. We can use that to our advantage." He grabbed a discarded plasma cutter and a coil of wire. "I'll set up some." deterrence. Ryan moved quickly, scavenging parts from damaged consoles and wiring, his mind already formulating a plan. He knew how to make things go boom, even with alien tech. The first breach occurred with a deafening screech. A section of the hull peeled back, revealing the dark, armored figures of the Cathar warriors. They were heavily armed, their weapons spitting bolts of energy that melted through metal with ease. Ryan, armed with a jury-rigged plasma rifle and a handful of makeshift grenades, took cover behind a toppled console. Thea, wielding a salvaged energy pistol, positioned herself beside him. The Cathar advanced, their movements insectal and relentless. They swept the corridor with their weapons, forcing Ryan and Thea to duck for cover. Ryan tossed a grenade, a crude device made from a plasma cell and a detonator salvaged from a damaged stasis pod. It exploded with a blinding flash and a concussive blast, momentarily stunning the Cathar. Thea seized the opportunity, firing a volley of energy bolts that struck two of the warriors, momentarily staggering them, but their armor held. "They're using a jamming signal," Thea shouted over the din of battle. "Disrupting our communications. I can't get a distress signal out." As the battle raged, Thea suddenly paused. "Ryan, look at this." She pointed at a schematic of the attacking Cathar ship displayed on a damaged console. "Their engine. It's failing. There's a critical design flaw. I've seen this before. It's why they are so desperate for resources." A searing pain ripped through Ryan's side. He staggered back, clutching at the wound. An energy bolt had pierced his makeshift armor. "Ryan," Thea cried, grabbing his arm. "We have to move. You're injured." Ignoring his protests, she dragged him towards a side corridor away from the main firefight. "I need to get you somewhere safe." As they retreated, the ship lurched violently. A direct hit. The corridor buckled and debris rained down from the ceiling. Ryan lost his grip on Thea, and they were thrown in opposite directions. When his vision cleared, Ryan saw Thea struggling against two Cathar warriors. They dragged her away, her screams echoing through the damaged ship. Ryan was alone, injured, and armed with nothing but a plasma pistol with limited charge. The hunt had begun. The world swam back into focus, a nauseating blend of flickering emergency lights and acrid smoke. Pain lanced through Ryan's side, a searing reminder of the Cathar blade. He groaned, pushing himself up onto his elbows. His vision blurred, but he could make out the mangled remains of the Talaxian console, sparking erratically. The battle had been brutal, swift, too swift. He pressed a hand to his side, feeling the sticky warmth of blood. Not a death sentence, but enough to slow him down. He needed to move, and fast. Thea. They had taken Thea. Grimacing, Ryan rummaged through the debris field, a discarded medkit miraculously intact. He ripped it open, grabbing a pressure bandage and a hypo spray of fast-acting analgesic. He slapped the bandage onto the wound, the coarse fabric a poor substitute for proper stitching. The hypo hissed, numbing the pain just enough to be bearable. His gaze swept the chaotic scene, settling on the direction Thea had been dragged. A faint trail of displaced debris, a smear of luminescent Talaxian blood, they led towards the gaping maw of the Cathar boarding tube. He wouldn't have much time. He had to be smart. Meanwhile, aboard the Cathar vessel, Thea stood rigid, surrounded by a circle of heavily armored Cathar warriors. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed under the harsh red lighting of the interrogation chamber. Her hands were bound, but her mind was racing, cataloging every detail. The rasping clicks of Cathar vocalizations, the metallic tang of their sweat, the hum of the ship's engines, a symphony of impending doom. "Where are the ship's schematics?" a guttural voice demanded. The Cathar interrogator, its mandibles clicking impatiently, loomed closer. The access codes, the location of the escape pods. Thea met its gaze, her expression a mask of blank defiance. "I know nothing," she stated, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. It was a lie, of course. She knew everything. The fate of her people rested on her ability to protect that knowledge. Do not insult our intelligence, Talaxian, the interrogator hissed, its multifaceted eyes narrowing. We know your kind. You are engineers, scientists. You possess the information we require. Thea feigned confusion. I am merely a sanitation worker. I clean the toilets. She hoped the pathetic lie would buy her some time, allow her to assess her surroundings to find a weakness. The Cathar sneered, its mandibles widening in a gesture of disgust. We have scanned your memories. We know you are lying. It paused, its gaze hardening. We need the parts, Talaxian. Our engines will fail without the life support systems from your ship. We will take them one way or another. Back on the ravaged Talaxian ship, Ryan meticulously observed the Cathar boarding tube. The scuff marks on the floor plating, the heat signatures radiating from the walls, they painted a clear picture of the Cathar's patrol routes, their predictable movements. They were creatures of habit, relying on brute force rather than cunning, a weakness he could exploit. He noticed a section of the wall plating that seemed slightly misaligned. He ran his hand along the seam, feeling a faint draft, a maintenance tunnel, a forgotten access point likely overlooked by the Cathar. Hope flickered within him. Ryan pressed his ear against the cool metal, a muffled hum, the clanking of machinery. The tunnel was active. He needed to find a way inside. Suddenly, a garbled transmission crackled through the Talaxian comm system, a desperate plea in fractured Galnet. Ryan strained to decipher the message, catching snippets of panicked voices, of failing life support, of a desperate need for tritium regulators, the same regulators used in human fusion reactors. His blood ran cold. The Cathar weren't just after the Talaxian ship for its weapons or technology. They needed something specific, something that only human tech could provide, something essential for their survival. Inside the Cathar interrogation chamber, the interrogator signaled to two hulking guards. They stepped forward, dragging a complex device into the center of the room, a mind probe. Thea's heart clenched. This was it. She focused on her breathing, trying to remain calm. She couldn't let them break her. She scanned the probe, her engineer's mind dissecting its intricate design. A series of neural interfaces linked to a central processing unit. But wait. There, near the power coupling, a poorly insulated junction, a potential vulnerability. Ryan forced the misaligned panel open, revealing a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. He squeezed inside, the metal scraping against his damaged side. He winced, biting back a groan. He had to keep moving. He pulled a small pack of C4 explosives from his belt, along with a detonator. He carefully positioned the charges along the tunnel wall, calculating the blast radius. A controlled demolition, enough to collapse the tunnel behind him, slowing down any pursuers. Back in the interrogation room, the Cathar were preparing the mind probe. Thea felt a surge of adrenaline as they strapped her into the chair, the cold metal biting into her skin. She glanced at the monitor displaying the ship's system's diagnostics. The engine temperature was spiking, the power output fluctuating wildly. Their desperation was growing, and with it their recklessness. Ryan pressed forward through the tunnel, the air thick with the stench of coolant and decay. He could hear the muffled sounds of the Cathar ship, the rhythmic thrum of its engines, the guttural commands of its crew. He was getting closer. He reached a junction, a branching network of tunnels leading in different directions. He needed to create a diversion to draw the Cathar away from Thea. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small EMP grenade. He primed the device, tossed it down one of the tunnels, and scrambled back the way he came. A blinding flash, followed by a wave of crackling energy. The lights flickered and died, plunging the Cathar ship into momentary darkness. Alarms blared, klaxons wailed. Chaos erupted. Ryan seized the opportunity. He sprinted down the remaining tunnel, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He reached a sealed door, a red light flashing above the access panel. He didn't have time to hack the system. He pulled out his pistol, aimed at the control panel, and fired. Sparks flew, the door hissed open, revealing a narrow corridor. He charged through, adrenaline coursing through his veins. On the bridge, the Cathar captain roared in frustration. "Lockdown, seal all sections, find the intruder." The ship lurched violently, throwing the Cathar off their feet. The engine had finally given out. In the interrogation chamber, the mind probe sputtered and died, its neural interfaces retracting with a hiss. Thea sagged against the restraints, gasping for breath. The lockdown sirens wailed, sealing the room. She was trapped, but she was alive, for now. The Cathar neural probe slammed into Thea's mind like a tidal wave of static. Images, fragmented and alien, ripped through her consciousness. Burning cities, skeletal figures clawing at barren earth, the cold, uncaring void of space. A searing pain bloomed behind her eyes, threatening to overwhelm her. But beneath the onslaught, a spark of Talaxian ingenuity flickered. She remembered the schematics, the subtle flaw in the probe's isolinear circuitry, a vulnerability the Cathar, in their brutal efficiency, had overlooked. Focusing all her will, she channeled the probe's energy back into itself, overloading the system. The pain intensified, then abruptly ceased. The Cathar guard, a hulking figure with chitinous armor, recoiled with a guttural roar, its mandibles clicking in confused fury. Thea, vision swimming, lunged. She ripped a control panel from the wall, the jagged edges a makeshift weapon, and slammed it against the guard's head. The creature staggered, momentarily stunned, giving Thea the precious seconds she needed to scramble to her feet. Meanwhile, chaos reigned on the Cathar ship. Ryan's hastily crafted EMP device had fried several key systems, plunging sections of the vessel into darkness. Alarms blared, klaxons wailed, and the air crackled with the scent of ozone. Cathar guards, disoriented and enraged, stumbled through the corridors, firing blindly into the darkness. Ryan, taking advantage of the confusion, moved like a shadow. He hugged the walls, using the flickering emergency lights as cover, his senses on high alert. Every hiss of a pneumatic door, every guttural shout, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He was a ghost in their machine, a predator in their den. Thea, knowing she couldn't hold out for long, fought with desperate ferocity. She dodged a swipe from the guard's energy blade, the weapon whistling past her ear, and retaliated with a kick to its knee joint. The guard stumbled, its armored leg buckling, but more were coming. She could hear their heavy footfalls echoing in the corridor. Then, the interrogation room door exploded inward, showering the chamber with sparks and twisted metal. Ryan stood silhouetted in the doorway, a plasma pistol in his hand, his face grim. Thea stared at him, surprised. "Didn't think I'd leave you to have all the fun, did you?" he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. Together, they formed a bulwark against the onslaught. Ryan's pistol spat bolts of searing energy, while Thea used her agility and knowledge of the ship's layout to outmaneuver their attackers. They moved as one, a whirlwind of coordinated violence, each anticipating the other's moves. A muffled boom echoed from the depths of the ship, followed by a chorus of panicked screams. Ryan's makeshift explosives had detonated in the maintenance tunnel, collapsing the narrow passageway and effectively cutting off the Cathar reinforcements. During the firefight, Ryan noticed something peculiar. The Cathar guards were consistently favoring a specific type of energy weapon, a compact rifle that emitted a distinctive blue pulse. He recognized the energy signature. It was similar to that produced by human fusion reactors. "Helium-3, he muttered, his mind racing. With a final, desperate surge, Thea and Ryan subdued the remaining guards, leaving them groaning on the floor. They didn't have time to celebrate. "We need to talk," Ryan said, his eyes grim. "Those weapons, they're powered by Helium-3. That's what they're after, and I think I know where they're getting it." He explained his theory, his words tumbling out in a rush. The Cathar needed Helium-3 to power their engines and weapons. Without it, their ship was a sitting duck. "We need to disable their reactor," he finished. Thea's eyes widened in understanding. If we shut down the reactor, their engines will fail completely. They'll be stranded. As they spoke, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared and a distorted voice crackled over the comm system. "Mayday, mayday, this is Cathar vessel Bloodied Claw requesting immediate assistance. Engine failure imminent, coordinates." The signal cut out abruptly. "They're desperate," Thea said, her voice tight with urgency. "They're calling for help." "We can't let them get a message out," Ryan said, his teeth clenched. "We need to sabotage their long-range communications array." They moved quickly, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the Cathar ship, but their actions hadn't gone unnoticed. The Cathar captain, a ruthless warrior with a cybernetically enhanced eye, had reviewed the security footage and pieced together Ryan's sabotage. He realized the threat to his ship's engines and issued a chilling order. "All remaining forces, intercept the humans. Protect the reactor at all costs." As Ryan and Thea reached the communications array, a squad of Cathar guards ambushed them, weapons blazing. The corridor erupted in a chaotic firefight. Energy bolts ricocheted off the walls, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burnt metal. Thea, using her technical expertise, worked frantically to disable the communications array, her fingers flying across the alien controls. Ryan, meanwhile, stood his ground, a one-man army against the Cathar onslaught. He fired with deadly accuracy, his movements fluid and efficient, years of combat experience guiding his every action. With a final surge of effort, Thea severed the main power conduit to the communications array. The consoles flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness, but their victory was short-lived. The ship's alarms blared even louder, and a synthesized voice announced, "Engine core destabilization imminent. Emergency protocols initiated." The Cathar captain, in a last-ditch effort to save his ship, had initiated a manual override, preparing to vent the engine core. The process would flood the ship with deadly radiation, killing everyone on board, but it would prevent a catastrophic explosion. Ryan and Thea, separated during the firefight, found themselves on opposite sides of the ship, trapped in a desperate race against time. They had to stop the Cathar captain, but the ship was falling apart around them. Ryan's decision solidified in his mind. He'd buy Thea time. "Get to that reactor," he barked, already moving. "I'm going after their captain." He used his knowledge of ship layouts, gleaned from countless simulations and real-world ops, his mind a rapid-fire predictive algorithm. Engineering schematics, coupled with an intuitive understanding of how someone like the Cathar captain would prioritize his movements, painted a path. The captain would head straight for the reactor core to ensure his victory. Thea was already at the control panel, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "He's initiated the override," she shouted, her voice strained. "He's rerouting power, disabling the safeties." The console chimed a discordant warning. "He's not just trying to melt it down. He's modifying the core, ensuring it goes critical even if we re-engage the protocols." Ryan burst through a maintenance hatch near the reactor access point. The air thrummed with a low, dangerous frequency. He spotted the Cathar captain, a hulking figure clad in battle armor, fiddling with a panel near the reactor's core. The captain whirled, snarling, a disruptor pistol snapping to bear. Ryan dodged the initial blast, the air crackling where it passed. He closed the distance, knowing he couldn't afford a protracted firefight. The captain was strong, but Ryan was faster, more agile. He ducked under a clumsy swing, driving a fist into the captain's gut, then followed with a sharp elbow to the back of the neck. Thea, meanwhile, was wrestling with the control system. "I can't disable the override remotely," she yelled, frustration lacing her voice. "He's locked me out." During a brief lull in the brutal dance, Ryan noticed a data port on the captain's armor, a thick cable snaking directly into the reactor controls. "Thea," he shouted, grunting as he parried a blow. "His armor. It's hardwired into the reactor. Can you use a virus to disrupt his control? Maybe, she replied, her fingers flying across the console. I can adapt the code from that mind probe incident, but I need to get close enough to upload it. A klaxon blared, bathing the reactor core in an ominous red light. Radiation levels spiked. The air tasted metallic, acrid. Ryan disarmed the captain, sending his disruptor skittering across the deck. But the captain, with a guttural roar, slammed a fist onto a panel on his gauntlet. Manual override. He bellowed, and Ryan knew, with sickening certainty, what was coming. He was going to vent the core. Ryan knew that damaging the captain's suit would mean instant death for both of them. Thinking fast, Ryan grabbed the disruptor pistol. He reconfigured the weapon, rerouting the energy flow. With a precise shot, he targeted the captain's gauntlet, not to destroy it, but to overload the manual override circuit, sending the signal back into the reactor's safety systems. The captain howled as the energy surged through his suit, throwing him back against the reactor wall. The manual override flicker died, but the reactor was still unstable, groaning under the strain. It's not enough, Thea screamed. The damage is too severe. It needs manual stabilization. Thea reached the reactor core, bypassing the lock system by physically inserting a data cable into an exposed port. Sparks flew as she forced the connection. Uploading the virus now. She cried, her face slick with sweat, but the reactor was too far gone. The system sputtered, unresponsive. Damn it, Ryan swore, his mind racing. Thea, what about the control rods? Can we adjust them manually? He remembered his grandfather showing him the basics of how a nuclear reactor worked. Primitive compared to this, but the principles were the same. It's insane. Thea shouted over the din. We don't have the calculations, we'd be guessing. Tell me what to do, Ryan insisted, his voice firm. Give me the parameters, I'll adjust them. I trust my gut. With Thea's frantic instructions echoing in his ears, Ryan reached for the control rods. He moved with a strange mix of intuition and precision, feeling the vibrations of the reactor, listening to its groans, trusting his instincts. He adjusted one rod, then another, tiny movements guided by Thea's technical expertise and his own inexplicable sense of what felt right. Finally, the groaning subsided, replaced by a low, steady hum. I think we did it, Ryan said, breathless, but the victory was short-lived. The lights flickered, died. The hum faded into silence. The ship plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows. Power's gone, Thea said, her voice hollow. Everything's failing, life support. It's going down. The ship shuddered, beginning to drift. They had stopped the meltdown, but they were stranded, powerless, and slowly suffocating. A metallic click echoed from the shadows. A figure emerged, clad in Cathar armor. It was one of the guards Ryan thought he'd disabled earlier. He held a disruptor pistol trained on Thea's head. The captain gave me orders, the guard rasped, his voice distorted by the vocoder. Before everything, he said to eliminate you, Talaxian, make sure we got away clean. He gestured with his head towards a section of the ship Ryan hadn't noticed before. He said, escape pods, hidden bay, only for Cathar. Surrender, human, the Cathar guard snarled, the bio rifle wavering slightly in his grip. Or I execute the Talaxian, now. Thea stood rigid, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't mask, but her chin remained defiantly high. The guard pressed the muzzle of the weapon closer to her head. Ryan's mind raced. The guard's armor was scarred, patched with crude welds. The bio rifle itself. The energy cell housing was cracked, leaking a faint, acrid vapor. Jury-rigged, definitely unstable. He took a shallow breath, trying to project an air of calm he didn't feel. Look, Ryan began, raising his hand slowly. We don't want any trouble, just let her go and I'll walk out of here. He scanned the guard's face, searching for any sign of humanity, any flicker of doubt. Think about what you're doing. This isn't your fight. You're just following orders. The guard's mandibles clicked. My orders are to secure this ship and eliminate all threats to the Cathar. Your species interferes. The captain made it clear, you die or she does. He paused, a glint in his multifaceted eyes, and the escape pods are equipped with cloaking devices. Once they launch, pursuit is unnecessary. Ryan saw it, then a flicker, almost imperceptible in the guard's left eye, a hesitation. He's not completely sold on this. Thea, her voice barely a whisper, said, Ryan, the escape pod bay, structural weakness, near conduit junction 7. Her eyes flickered towards a panel on the wall behind the guard. Requires distraction. Ryan lowered his hand slightly, feigning defeat. All right, you win. I surrender, just don't hurt her. He took a step forward, then another, his eyes fixed on the guard's weapon. As he moved, he kicked a loose panel concealing damaged reactor conduits. A spray of sparks erupted, followed by a sharp, contained explosion. The guard roared, stumbling backward, momentarily releasing Thea as he raised his weapon to shield his face. The small blast rocked the corridor, sending shards of metal flying and bathing the area in flickering emergency lights. Now, Ryan yelled, diving forward. Thea, despite her injuries, reacted instantly. She grabbed a nearby wrench and slammed it into the conduit junction she had indicated. Sparks flew, plunging half the corridor into darkness. Ryan grappled with the guard, focusing on the weapon. He twisted the bio rifle, forcing the cracked energy cell housing against the guard's armor. A surge of energy arced out and the guard screamed, dropping the weapon. But as the guard fell, his hand darted to his belt, activating a small metallic device. A high-pitched whine filled the corridor, a distress beacon. He signaled the others. Thea shouted, her voice strained. And the escape pods, the beacon. It triggers the automatic launch sequence. They raced towards the escape pod bay. The heavy door hissed open, revealing a scene of frantic activity. Several Cathar, clad in combat armor, were strapping themselves into escape pods. At the far end of the bay, 2 guards stood watch over a central control panel. They're prioritizing one pod, Thea gasped, pointing towards a sleek black escape pod in the center of the bay. It contains strategic data, information about Talaxian defense systems, our homeworld. Ryan's gut twisted. This wasn't just about escape, it was about survival. We have to stop that pod from launching. He glanced at Thea. She was clutching her side, her face pale with pain. You're in no condition to fight. Thea met his gaze, her eyes filled with a fierce drive. The survival of my people. It is more important than my own. Ryan's mind flashed back to the faces of his fallen comrades, the weight of his past failures pressing down on him. I can't let another world die. He looked at Thea, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes. Ryan started to say, but was cut off. Go, Thea said, pushing him towards the control panel. I'll be fine here. Ryan, torn between his promise to protect Thea and his responsibility to the Talaxian people, made a choice. I'm going to distract the others while you get into the pod and escape. Before going off to assist with her escape, Ryan set his timer on his comm, setting it to explode after he is gone, which will wipe out most of the remaining ship's power, but will not kill the people in the escape pods. Ryan went to the control panel and locked Thea in the room with the escape pod, making sure she is safe from the other Cathar soldiers, and set off to wipe out the rest of the ship's system before his comm explodes. Ryan moved, a shadow flitting through the oppressive corridors of the Cathar ship. His makeshift EMP grenade, a jury-rigged power cell, and some scavenged wiring had bought him a precious few minutes, enough to slip past the initial wave of enraged soldiers. The air hung thick and metallic, stinging his nostrils. He navigated by the emergency lighting, a sickly green that cast long, distorted shadows. He knew his limited knowledge of Talaxian systems was a handicap, but he also knew Cathar tactics, brute force, overwhelming numbers. He would use that against them. He wired a plasma conduit to overload if anyone triggered the nearby motion sensor. A small, localized explosion, hopefully enough to deter pursuit. Meanwhile, light years away, Thea's escape pod ejected into the black void. The launch was smooth, almost serene, but a high-pitched whine sliced through the calm. The cloaking device, cobbled together from salvaged parts, sputtered, failing to fully engage. A warning klaxon blared inside the pod. On the Cathar ship, the sensor arrays flickered. A guttural alarm barked through the Cathar vessel. Thea's pod, for a heart-stopping moment, bloomed into sharp focus on their screens. Before the cloak could fully activate, a small Cathar fighter peeled off from patrol, its engine screaming as it adjusted its trajectory. Back on the ship, Ryan reached a communications hub, a tangle of glowing cables and alien glyphs. He tapped into the system, bypassing security protocols with a series of rapid commands. Static crackled, then a fragmented message burst through. Escape pod detected. Vector. Thea, his gut clenched. He had to move faster. Then, a horrifying realization. A secondary ping. The Cathar weren't relying solely on the main data core. They were preparing a backup transmission using a secondary relay station. If that data got out, Thea's sacrifice everything would be for nothing. His face hardened. The main data core was still the primary objective, but the relay, that was the immediate threat. He rerouted his course, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He hoped Thea could hold out. In the cold vacuum of space, Thea gripped the controls of her escape pod, her nucleus tightening. The Cathar fighter was gaining, its energy cannons glowing with menacing light. She spotted it, a field of debris, remnants of a previous battle, a graveyard of ships. An idea sparked in her mind. She manipulated the pod's thrusters, sending it tumbling towards the wreckage. Ryan reached the secondary relay station. It was heavily guarded, a cluster of hulking Cathar soldiers patrolling the perimeter. He couldn't go in guns blazing. He needed a different approach, stealth. He replayed the intercepted message, isolating the Cathar communication protocols. He recognized a priority code, a distress signal. He modified the signal, injecting a false report. Breach, Sector 7, Talaxian saboteurs. He transmitted the signal, watching as a handful of guards peeled off, rushing towards the fabricated threat. Now was his chance. He slipped through the weakened perimeter, moving like a ghost through the shadows. Inside the relay station, he accessed the main terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, incomprehensible, yet he recognized patterns, data streams. Then he saw it, a detailed map of Talaxian defense systems, population centers marked with chilling precision. The Cathar weren't just wiping out survivors, they were systematically dismantling an entire civilization. Rage surged through him, cold and focused. He couldn't just destroy the data, he had to corrupt it. He started rewriting the code, feeding false coordinates, fabricated weaknesses, phantom fleets. He turned their own strategic data into a weapon against them. His fingers flew across the console. Time was running out. Alarms blared in the distance. He finished the modifications, uploaded the corrupted data, and sprinted out of the relay station. He barely cleared the perimeter when the station exploded, a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed. The Cathar would be on high alert now, but he had bought Thea some time. He had to get to the main data core. He reached the main data core chamber, a vast, cathedral-like space filled with humming machinery and flickering lights. But he wasn't alone. Standing before the core, blocking his path, was the Cathar captain, flanked by several elite guards. "Impressive, human," the captain sneered, his voice a guttural growl. "But predictable. We anticipated your next move." Ryan's heart sank. "It's over," the captain continued, a cruel glint in his eyes. "The strategic data has already been partially transmitted to the fleet." Hope dwindled. Had he failed? Was all this for nothing? Then he saw it. A flicker of uncertainty in the captain's eyes. He wasn't aware of the misinformation planted in the secondary relay. He was banking on the primary data, the data Ryan had just corrupted. "You think you've won?" Ryan spat, his voice tinged with defiance. You have no idea what's coming. Confusion rippled through the ranks of the Cathar guards. The captain hesitated. Ryan seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, grabbing a discarded power cable and whipping it around the legs of the nearest guard. The guard stumbled, crashing into another. Chaos erupted. Ryan fought with a ferocity born of desperation. He dodged plasma blasts, parried energy blades using his training, his instincts, his sheer will to survive. He disabled one guard with a pressure point strike, disarmed another with a swift kick. But he was outnumbered, outgunned. A searing pain ripped through his side. He ignored it, adrenaline masking the agony. He reached the main data core, his hands slick with blood. He accessed the system, feeding the corrupted data stream, praying it wasn't too late. The Cathar captain roared, his face contorted with rage. He raised his energy blade, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. Ryan knew he was out of options. He reached for his comm unit, his fingers fumbling with the detonator. A last-ditch effort. A desperate gamble, he activated the explosive timer. The comm unit exploded, a concussive blast that ripped through the chamber. Sparks flew, cables snapped, the data core system sputtered and died. Ryan was thrown against a wall, his head slamming against the cold metal. The world swam. He was disoriented, bleeding, barely conscious. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. He looked up. The ship was falling apart around him. Alarms blared, emergency lights flickered, and smoke filled the air. And standing before him, silhouetted against the dying light, was the Cathar captain. Severely injured, his armor scorched, but alive. And determined. The captain raised his energy blade, his eyes burning with hate. Ryan was cornered. His fate hung in the balance. The world erupted in white-hot pain. Shrapnel tore into Ryan's arm as the comm unit detonated, the concussive force slamming him against the corridor wall. He tasted blood, metallic and sharp. But through the ringing in his ears, he heard the Cathar captain roar, momentarily disoriented by the blast. That was all Ryan needed. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the searing agony in his arm, and lunged forward, using the smoke and debris as cover. The Cathar captain, his mandibles clicking in fury, shook his massive head, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. He spotted Ryan disappearing down the corridor and bellowed a challenge, his voice echoing through the damaged ship. Ignoring the flashing red warnings on his internal diagnostic structural integrity compromised, he charged after the human, his heavy boots pounding against the metal deck. Ryan risked a glance behind him. The captain was gaining. Ahead, he spotted a damaged support beam, groaning under the strain. An idea, desperate and risky, flashed through his mind. He veered towards it, firing a wild shot from his scavenged pulse pistol to draw the captain closer. He reached the beam and braced himself, slamming his shoulder against it with all his remaining strength. The weakened metal shrieked in protest. With a deafening crash, the beam buckled and collapsed, tons of twisted metal and sparking wires plummeting downwards. The Cathar captain roared in frustration as the debris slammed into him, pinning his lower body beneath the wreckage. His upper torso remained free, his eyes burning with murderous intent. Ryan, bloodied and bruised, stumbled past the fallen beam, ignoring the captain's enraged cries. He had to get out. On the Cathar bridge, the communications officer frantically worked at his console, sweat beading on his brow. "Admiral, I'm receiving conflicting strategic data from the secondary relay. Talaxian defense outposts reported where there are none. Across the fleet, confusion reigned." Some commanders, trusting the altered data, began diverting their ships, peeling away from the main assault force to investigate the phantom outposts. Their formations fractured, their attack faltering. Other commanders, veterans of countless campaigns, sensed something was wrong. "This data is inconsistent. I suspect sabotage." One snarled over the comms. "Are we receiving false intelligence? Who is responsible for this incompetence?" Accusations flew, trust eroding within the Cathar ranks. In her crippled escape pod, Thea coughed, her lungs burning. The oxygen leak was worse than she thought. The pressure gauge dipped ominously. She had to ration what little remained. Every breath was a conscious effort, a battle against the encroaching darkness. Grimly, she activated the emergency repair system. A nanite swarm, released from a small dispenser, crawled across the gash in the hull, sealing the breach with a shimmering resin. It was a temporary fix at best. The repair was unstable, the nanites flickering erratically. She would have to monitor it constantly, feeding it energy to keep it from failing. Far behind her, a lone Cathar patrol ship, operating on independent orders, remained unaffected by the misinformation plaguing the fleet. Its sensors locked onto Thea's escape pod, its engines burning hot as it relentlessly closed the distance. Ryan, limping through the maze of corridors, stumbled upon a hidden emergency escape route. He found himself in a small chamber, lined with deactivated Cathar escape pods. They were damaged, stripped of their power cells, but one was partially functional. An idea, as reckless as it was brilliant, formed in his mind. He dragged himself into the damaged pod and rerouted the power from its life support systems to its emergency beacon. He then transmitted a false distress signal, broadcasting on all Cathar frequencies. Mayday, Mayday, Cathar escape pod stranded, critical life support failure. Request immediate assistance. The Cathar patrol ship, its sensors picking up the distress call, hesitated. A stranded comrade was a priority. With a guttural growl of frustration, the captain of the patrol ship abandoned its pursuit of Thea's escape pod and altered course, accelerating towards the disabled pod. In her own escape pod, Thea watched as the pursuing vessel abruptly turned away. Relief washed over her, momentarily easing the burning in her lungs. Someone must have created a diversion. A glimmer of hope flickered within her. Ryan, his strength fading, activated the escape pod's limited communication system. He tried to reach Thea, desperately keying in her frequency. "Thea, can you hear me? This is Ryan. But the signal was too weak, swallowed by the vastness of space. Only static answered his call. On the Cathar flagship, the Admiral watched the unfolding chaos with growing fury. "Report. What is the meaning of these conflicting reports? Why are ships breaking formation?" He pounded his fist on the command console. "Initiate a complete data integrity check. Communications blackout. Seal all external channels. I want to know who is responsible for this sabotage." His eyes narrowed, suspicion hardening his features. A human. It must be a human counterintelligence operation. Find him. I want that human alive. The hunt for Ryan had just become the fleet's top priority. Suddenly, Ryan's escape pod lurched violently. Alarms blared as the pod was caught in a gravitational anomaly, pulled towards a massive, derelict space station looming in the distance. Its decaying hull was scarred by time and battle, its purpose unknown. In her own escape pod, struggling against the encroaching hypoxia, Thea's sensors flickered erratically. Through the haze of her vision, she spotted a faint, intermittent signal emanating from the derelict station. A potential chance of rescue, or a new, unknown threat. On the Cathar flagship, the Admiral stared at the sensor readings, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. "That station. It's ancient. I suspect a Talaxian trap, or perhaps a hidden base of operations. Order all ships to converge on that location. Leave nothing to chance." The fate of Ryan and Thea, once again, hung precariously in the balance, drawn towards the silent, ominous hulk of the derelict space station. The pod slammed into the docking bay with a bone-jarring crash, the already strained metal screaming in protest. Red lights flickered intermittently across the small cabin, casting long, dancing shadows. Another jolt, smaller this time, echoed through the escape pod, and Ryan cursed under his breath. Whatever life support the derelict station still possessed was taking another beating. He wrestled the release lever and the pod's door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. His helmet light cut through the gloom, illuminating walls covered in strange symbols and corroded panels. Wires sparked erratically, spitting showers of blue electricity. The air tasted stale, metallic, and thin. Advanced technology, undoubtedly, but choked by decades of decay. Ryan took a step out of the pod and nearly stumbled. His stomach lurched as the gravity shifted, pulling him first towards the floor, then releasing him into a disconcerting near weightlessness. He grabbed a handrail, his fist clenched as he fought to maintain his balance. The station itself was dying, groaning under its own failing systems. Elsewhere, Thea's escape pod careened wildly through the debris field surrounding the station. Automated defense turrets, long dormant, suddenly sprung to life, targeting her small craft with surprising accuracy. Alarms blared in the cockpit as she wrestled with the controls, desperately trying to evade the incoming fire. It was no use. A direct hit crippled her engines, sending the pod spiraling towards the station. Thea braced for impact. The crash was violent. Pain lanced through her arm as she slammed against the console. The world spun. When she finally regained her senses, the pod was a mangled wreck, embedded deep within the station's hull. Her oxygen alarm blared insistently. She checked the gauge, dwindling faster than it should. She had to move, and fast. Stumbling out of the wreckage, Thea found herself in a vast chamber filled with towering, cylindrical containers. Each held a figure suspended in a viscous fluid, their faces pale and still. The long-dead crew of the station, preserved in some kind of specialized containment. A biological research facility, it seemed. A shiver ran down her spine. Back in the corridor, Ryan cautiously advanced, his weapon raised. He wasn't alone. Automated maintenance drones, their metallic bodies scarred and dented, still patrolled the station's corridors. Some were inert, mere hulks of metal. Others were actively hostile. One, a bulky repair unit with welding arms, screeched towards him, its manipulators sparking. Ryan fired a warning shot, but the drone kept coming. He was forced to disable it with a well-aimed blast. Then a different drone, smaller and more agile, rolled into view. It paused, its single optical sensor focusing on Ryan. He tensed, expecting another attack, but instead the drone emitted a series of inquisitive beeps. An idea sparked in Ryan's mind. He pulled a small device from his pack, a universal interface tool he'd picked up years ago. "Let's see if we can make a deal," he muttered. Minutes later, after some frantic reprogramming, the drone chirped again, its optical sensor blinking green. It hovered expectantly, awaiting instructions. A distant rumble shook the station. The reprogrammed drone emitted a series of urgent beeps, displaying a schematic of the station on a small holographic projector. Cathar, Ryan realized. They're here. He could hear faint sounds of explosions and weapon fire in the distance. Meanwhile, Thea, limping through the station's darkened corridors, heard the unmistakable sounds of Cathar voices. She pressed herself against a cold metal wall, peering around a corner. A patrol of heavily armed Cathar soldiers was approaching her crashed escape pod, their weapons raised. "Search the wreckage," she heard one of them growl. "Find any survivors." They didn't know she was so close. She strained to listen to their comms. Confirming designation, Biological Weapons Research Facility, potential source of Talaxian vulnerability. The words hit her like a physical blow. This station. It wasn't just abandoned. It was a tomb, holding secrets that could explain everything. Elsewhere in the station, Ryan and his newly acquired drone companion reached a massive chamber. Rows upon rows of deactivated containment units stretched into the darkness, similar to the ones Thea had found, but these held Cathar soldiers, suspended in animation. A chill went down Ryan's spine. What was this place? He took a step forward and his foot caught on a loose cable. He stumbled, his hand striking a control panel. A light flickered on above one of the units. A low hum filled the air. The containment unit hissed open, and a hulking Cathar soldier, eyes blazing with fury, erupted from the tube and lunged at Ryan. Thea, hearing the sounds of fighting nearby, cautiously moved towards the commotion. She needed allies, or at least a distraction to draw the Cathar patrol away from her. Ryan ducked under the Cathar soldier's wild swing, the creature's claws ripping through the air where his head had been moments before. He scrambled back, drawing his sidearm. The Cathar was huge, easily twice his size, and enraged. Bullets pinged harmlessly off its thick armor. Ryan tossed aside the useless weapon. He had to think. He remembered a pressure point in the neck he'd learned during his training. A long shot, but it was all he had. He dodged another attack, using the environment to his advantage, leading the Cathar into a narrow corridor. He feinted left, then right, confusing the creature. Finally, he saw his chance. He leaped forward, jamming his thumb into the pressure point. The Cathar roared in pain, staggering back. Ryan followed up with a swift kick to the knee, dropping the creature to the ground. That's when Thea arrived, weapon drawn. She saw Ryan standing over the downed Cathar soldier, his face grim, a makeshift weapon in his hand. Her heart clenched. Another human, another threat. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. The lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into near darkness. The gravity fluctuated wildly, throwing both Ryan and Thea off balance. The station was falling apart. Ryan consulted his device. "Massive energy signature detected," he announced, his voice strained. "Emanating from the center of the station. Something big is about to happen." On board the Cathar flagship, the fleet admiral received the scan results. An energy signature. Impossible. Scan again. It must be a Talaxian superweapon. He thumped his hand on the console. "Prepare for immediate boarding. Secure the station and eliminate the threat." Thea leveled her weapon at Ryan. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice tight with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" The station groaned around them, a dying beast about to unleash its final, desperate roar. "Why did you release it?" Thea's voice, raspy and tinged with accusation, cut through the echoing silence of the chamber. Her good eye narrowed, focusing on Ryan with unnerving intensity. The dim emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows across her scarred face, highlighting the ridges of grafted skin. Ryan scrubbed a hand through his hair, the gesture more weary than defiant. "I didn't release it. I tripped over the damn thing. Some kind of proximity sensor. It just activated." He gestured lamely at the deactivated Cathar unit lying on the floor, its metallic limbs twitching sporadically. "Look, I was defending myself. It came at me." He winced. "It was clumsy, I know, but it was self-defense." Thea remained unconvinced, her posture rigid. "Clumsy? You expect me to believe that a human, a species I've only heard bad things about, accidentally frees a Cathar soldier?" Ryan sighed. "Look, I'm a doctor, not a demolition expert. I tripped. It happens. Besides, what's done is done. We need to focus on surviving this." Thea hesitated, her gaze flickering between Ryan and the inert Cathar unit. The station groaned, another shudder rattling through the metal deck. "Fine," she conceded grudgingly. "A temporary alliance. We survive this. Then we settle our differences. This station is falling apart. We won't last long without cooperation." "Agreed," Ryan said, relief washing over him. "So, what do you know about this place?" Thea crossed her arms, her expression grim. This was a research facility, a biological weapons lab specifically designed to target the Talaxian genome. Ryan's stomach dropped. Biological weapons, that explains the Cathar interest. They want whatever's left. And that energy signature. Thea's voice trailed off, her brow furrowed in thought. Ryan picked up the thread. Could be related, some kind of containment field. A power source for the weapon itself. Before either could elaborate, a sharp, metallic clang echoed from the corridor outside. Then another, closer this time. "Cathar patrol." "They're here," Thea hissed, her hand instinctively reaching for the makeshift weapon cobbled together from salvage. "We need to move. Now." Thea led the way, her movements surprisingly agile despite her injuries. She navigated the decaying corridors with a familiarity that spoke of long years spent within these walls. The station's infrastructure was a disaster. Sparking wires dangled from the ceiling. Sections of the floor were buckled and warped, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of decay. "This way," she muttered, guiding Ryan through a narrow opening in a collapsed wall panel. "Maintenance tunnels, they won't expect us to use them." As they crawled through the cramped, dimly lit passage, Ryan noticed Thea favoring her left leg. "You're hurt," he said, concern etching his features. "Let me take a look." "Later," she snapped, pushing onward. "We don't have time." Ignoring her protest, Ryan gently but firmly pulled her to a halt. He examined her leg in the flickering light, his fingers probing the torn fabric and bruised flesh. "The escape pod crash," he muttered. "It's worse than I thought. You've got a nasty contusion, maybe a hairline fracture." He rummaged in his medkit, pulling out a synth bandage. "This will help stabilize it, but you need to stay off it as much as possible." Thea watched him work, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you," she said, the word barely audible. They continued their escape, the maintenance tunnels twisting and turning like the entrails of some dying beast. Finally, Thea stopped before a sealed doorway, its surface corroded and scarred. "This leads to a secondary research lab," she said. "It's our best bet for finding supplies. Or answers." The door hissed open, revealing a darkened chamber filled with deactivated equipment and rows of data consoles. As Ryan activated a nearby terminal, the screens flickered to life, displaying a cascade of alien symbols and complex schematics. "Data logs," Ryan said, his fingers flying across the controls. "Let's see what we can find." The information scrolled across the screen, revealing the station's sinister history, the development of a biological weapon designed to eradicate the Talaxian race. But then, a new set of data logs appeared, detailing a countermeasure developed by the Cathar. "They created a cure?" Ryan asked, incredulous. "Why?" Thea stared at the screen, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. I don't understand." Suddenly, the terminal beeped, a warning flashing across the screen. "Intrusion detected," Ryan said, his voice tight. "Cathar, they're onto us." Before they could react, the laboratory door burst open and a squad of heavily armed Cathar soldiers stormed into the chamber. "Get the data," Ryan yelled, shoving Thea towards the terminal. He grabbed a discarded metal pipe and charged towards the Cathar, swinging it wildly. "Go. I'll hold them off." Using his knowledge of human combat tactics, Ryan created a diversion, dodging and weaving between the Cathar soldiers, drawing their fire while Thea frantically downloaded the data logs. Thea's fingers danced across the console, lines of code blurring as she downloaded everything. Finally, with a triumphant cry, she pulled the data rod free. "Got it." Just as she did, the station groaned again and the lights flickered violently. The gravity fluctuations intensified, sending equipment crashing to the floor. "We need to get out of here," Ryan shouted, grabbing Thea's arm. As they scrambled back into the maintenance tunnels, Ryan glanced at a flickering display. "The gravity is getting worse. The energy signature. It's spiking." "It's a failsafe," Thea realized, her eyes widening in horror. "A self-destruct mechanism. If the weapon can't be contained, the station will be destroyed to prevent its spread." The Cathar were gaining on them, their guttural roars echoing through the tunnels. "We can't outrun them," Ryan said, panting. "We need to disable that failsafe." "It's suicide," Thea protested. "The energy signature. It's coming from the core. It will be heavily guarded." "We don't have a choice," Ryan said, his mind focused. "They're planning to weaponize this station, use that virus on other Talaxian colonies. We can't let that happen." Thea looked at Ryan, her expression a mixture of fear and perseverance. "Then let's go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's stop them." The two moved forward, deeper into the station, towards the source of the energy signature, toward a massive chamber containing a highly unstable energy core, guarded by a large contingent of Cathar soldiers. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no other choice. The flashbang detonated, a searing white bloom that painted the narrow corridor. The Cathar guards, thick-bodied and clad in segmented armor, staggered, their multifaceted eyes momentarily blinded. Ryan exploded into motion, a blur of practiced violence honed in countless simulations and a few too many real-world skirmishes. His fist connected with the nearest Cathar's throat, collapsing its windpipe with a sickening crunch. Thea, already moving, unleashed a short burst from her plasma rifle. The searing bolt splashed against the second Cathar's armor, charring the plates and sending it reeling. "Shielded," she yelled, her voice tight with urgency. Before them, the energy core chamber shimmered, bathed in an ominous green glow. The core itself, a pulsating crystal lattice of unimaginable power, was encased within a swirling vortex of emerald energy and impenetrable shield. "Direct attacks are useless," Thea stated, her voice strained. "The field disperses energy weapons." Ryan scanned the chamber, his mind racing. Then an image flashed in his memory, the salvaged components from their escape pod scavenged from the wreckage of the ship. "The harmonic resonator," he said, almost to himself. It emitted a specific frequency to stabilize the pod's energy matrix. Maybe it can disrupt the shield frequency," Thea finished, her eyes widening with understanding. "But setting it up will take time." "I'll buy us some," Ryan said grimly. He grabbed a piece of twisted metal from the floor, fashioning a makeshift club. "Just get that resonator online." Ryan charged forward, drawing the Cathar guard's attention. He feinted left, then right, his movements fluid and unpredictable. The Cathar, clumsy in the confined space, struggled to track him. He landed a blow on one's knee joint, sending it crashing to the ground, then spun to face the other, deflecting a clumsy swipe with the metal bar. Thea worked feverishly, her fingers dancing across the resonator's damaged interface. Sparks flew as she bypassed damaged circuits, rerouting power with desperate precision. Almost there. A klaxon blared, shattering the tense silence. Red emergency lights pulsed, casting long, distorted shadows. "The shield is adapting," Thea shouted, her voice imbued with panic. "It's reinforcing itself." Ryan grunted, dodging another blow. The Cathar were slow but relentless. He could feel the heat radiating from the energy core, the air thick with ozone. Thea spared a glance at the core. The energy signature. It's not just shielding itself, it's drawing power from the entire station. She realized horror dawning on her face. The decay rate is accelerating. Ryan ducked under a wild swing, slamming his elbow into the Cathar's faceplate. "We don't have time for this," he yelled. He needed another angle. He needed to slow them down. His eyes darted around the room, landing on a series of coolant pipes snaking along the walls. He remembered his medical training, the delicate balance of systems within the human body, the catastrophic consequences of overheating. "The cooling system," he exclaimed. "If we can overload it." Thea, her fingers still flying across the resonator, accessed the Cathar data logs. Her expression hardened. "They intend to weaponize the virus," she said, her voice filled with cold fury. "Against Talix Prime, they'll wipe out my people." She paused, her hand hovering over the activation switch. "I have a countermeasure," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "A failsafe, but it was designed for the original strain. Against this weaponized version, it might not work. It could make things worse." Ryan saw the doubt etched on her face, the fear in her eyes. He knew what it was like to carry the weight of impossible choices, the crushing burden of responsibility. Thea hesitated, her mind racing. Was it a trap? A final, desperate gamble by the Cathar? "Thea," Ryan said, his voice firm, cutting through her internal turmoil. "Trust your instincts. You know this technology better than anyone. What does your gut tell you?" He met her gaze, his eyes conveying unwavering faith. "Lives are at stake." Thea took a deep breath, steeling her determination. "We use both," she declared, her voice regaining its strength. "The countermeasure and your cooling system strategy, a combined approach." Ryan nodded, his mind already working. "I can modify a grenade," he said, his eyes glinting with inspiration. "Use components from the countermeasure. Create a makeshift imp. Disrupt the shield and overload the cooling system simultaneously." He worked quickly, stripping wires, rerouting circuits, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. The air crackled with energy as he combined the Talaxian technology with his own improvised modifications. As he finished, a low rumble echoed through the station. The floor vibrated beneath their feet. A squad of Cathar reinforcements, led by a towering figure in heavily augmented armor, stormed into the chamber. The commander stopped, his multifaceted eyes locking onto Thea. "So," he rumbled, his voice distorted by the vocoder in his helmet, "the traitor returns." He paused, a hint of something akin to sadness in his voice. "Did you know, Thea, that your parents were instrumental in the weapons development? Collaborators, they called them, loyal servants of the Cathar." Thea recoiled as if struck, her face paling. The revelation hit her like a physical blow, shattering her carefully constructed world, but only for a moment. She straightened her shoulders, her eyes blazing with defiance. "My family made their choices," she said, her voice ringing with newfound drive. "I make mine." Ryan, sensing her inner turmoil, placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. "Now," he yelled, tossing the modified grenade towards the energy core. The grenade detonated, unleashing a wave of electromagnetic energy. The green shield flickered, sputtered, and died. The cooling system groaned under the sudden strain, but the Cathar commander was ready. He activated a personal energy shield, deflecting the brunt of the EMP blast. He lunged at Ryan, his augmented fists crackling with energy. The two men collided, a whirlwind of brutal force. Ryan dodged a haymaker, feeling the heat of the energy discharge singe his hair. He countered with a kick to the commander's knee, but the armor absorbed the blow. During the struggle, the Cathar commander's gauntlet slammed into the EMP device, tearing loose a vital component. The device sputtered, convulsed, and unleashed a surge of uncontrolled energy, bathing the chamber in an erratic blue light. The energy core pulsed violently, threatening to overload and take the entire station with it. Ryan reacted instantly. The EMP generator sputtered, spitting arcs of violet electricity as its casing glowed an ominous red. He dove, hands outstretched, towards the device's mangled control panel, attempting a manual override. A jolt like a white-hot poker slammed through his arm, muscles seizing. The smell of ozone filled the air, stinging his nostrils. He bit back a scream, fighting to maintain his grip on the sparking wires. Thea, the commander's words echoing in her mind, weaponized core, the end of Talax froze. Images flashed, her family laughing under the twin suns of Talax Prime, the research lab gleaming with promise, the blinding flash, the searing heat, the silence that followed, the weapon research. It was all a lie. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the tide of grief and betrayal threatening to drown her. "Thea," Ryan roared, his voice strained with pain. He wrestled with a melted circuit board. "Focus. We don't have time for this. Lives are on the line." The urgency in his voice cut through her paralysis, a cold splash of reality. Before she could fully gather herself, the Cathar commander lunged. He moved with surprising speed for his size, a blur of chitin and muscle. Ryan, caught off balance, was forced to disengage from the EMP device, narrowly dodging a swipe from the commander's energy blade. The device sparked and hissed, unattended. Shaking off the lingering horror, Thea forced herself to analyze the EMP generator. Her eyes darted across the alien schematics, displayed on a cracked monitor. The energy readings pulsed erratically. Then she saw a cascading feedback loop, an exponential amplification of the core's energy output. "The power matrix," she shouted, her voice regaining its edge. "It's creating a feedback loop. It's amplifying the surge. Reroute power from the auxiliary containment system." Thea barked, pointing to a panel on the far side of the chamber. "Bypass the primary regulators." It's the only way to break the loop. Ryan, bruised but unbroken, scrambled towards the indicated panel. His fingers flew across the unfamiliar controls, his knowledge of electrical systems guiding him. He bypassed the damaged regulators, diverting power from the secondary containment field, a risky move that left them more vulnerable but offered the only chance of stabilizing the EMP. The energy surge lessened, the ominous red glow fading to a flickering orange. The Cathar commander roared in frustration. He unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, bolts of superheated energy tearing through the chamber. Ryan and Thea dove for cover behind a mangled support beam, the air thick with the smell of burning metal and singed flesh. As plasma seared the metal around them, Thea noticed something. The commander's personal energy shield, a shimmering barrier that deflected the plasma blasts, flickered momentarily each time he fired. His shield, she yelled over the din. It fluctuates when he fires. There's a vulnerability. Ryan, adrenaline coursing through him, saw the opportunity. "We overload it," he said, his mind racing. "A concentrated burst of plasma energy right when he fires. It's risky, but it's our only shot." Thea nodded grimly. "I can modify my rifle, focus the energy output, create a concentrated blast, but it'll require a manual override of the safety protocols. It's dangerous." "Do it," Ryan said, his eyes hardening with persistence. "I'll provide cover." While Ryan laid down a withering barrage of fire, forcing the commander to keep his shield raised, Thea worked feverishly on her plasma rifle. Sparks flew as she bypassed safety interlocks, rerouting power conduits. Her hands moved with practiced precision, years of technical expertise distilled into this desperate moment. Finally, she finished the modifications. "Ready," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "But I need a clear shot." Ryan took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the cover, drawing the commander's fire. Plasma bolts slammed into the support beam, showering him with sparks and debris. He gritted his teeth, holding his ground, giving Thea the opening she needed. Thea aimed, her finger hovering over the firing stud. As the commander unleashed another plasma blast, his shield flickering, she fired. A concentrated beam of raw energy erupted from her rifle, slamming into the vulnerable point in the commander's shield. The shield flared, overloaded, and died with a crackling hiss. The Cathar commander staggered, momentarily stunned. Ryan seized the opportunity. He surged forward, closing the distance in a blur of motion. He ducked under a wild swing of the commander's energy blade and slammed a fist into his exposed jaw. The commander stumbled back, disoriented. Ryan followed up with a kick to the knee, buckling the alien's leg. He disarmed the commander, sending the energy blade clattering to the floor, and then delivered a final, decisive blow to the temple. The commander crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Silence descended, broken only by the crackling of the damaged EMP generator. With the commander subdued and the surge temporarily contained, Ryan and Thea approached the energy core cautiously. It was still humming with dangerous energy, the repairs only a temporary reprieve. "This won't hold," Thea said, her voice grim. "The core is still unstable." She ran another diagnostic, her fingers flying across the console. "There's a secondary power source," she said, her brow furrowing. "Tied to their personal ships. It's feeding back into the core, destabilizing it further." Ryan frowned. "So we disable the ships?" Thea shook her head. "If we cut off that power source completely, the Cathar won't be able to escape. They won't be able to warn their fleet." A tense silence filled the chamber. The fate of the Talaxian race, perhaps even the galaxy, hung in the balance. Did they prioritize stopping the EMP, even if it meant stranding the Cathar and potentially alerting their entire fleet to the trap? Or did they allow the Cathar ships to escape, risking the complete destabilization of the core and the potential destruction of everything around them? Or did they allow the Cathar ships to escape, risking the complete destabilization of the core and the potential destruction of everything around them? The question hung unspoken as Thea's fingers danced across the navigation console, rerouting the trajectories of the 3 Cathar cruisers. "They're on their way," she said, her voice tight. "A fabricated distress signal and a generous head start. Hopefully, it buys us some time." The holographic display shimmered, showing the modified flight paths leading the cruisers into the uncharted void. Ryan, meanwhile, moved through the echoing corridors toward the Cathar medical bay. The air hummed with a low, guttural thrum, the alien equivalent of life support. Inside, he found rows of bio-containment units, each occupied by a wounded Cathar soldier. Their chitinous armor was cracked and scorched, their breathing ragged. Despite their menacing reputation, they looked vulnerable, almost pitiable. He knelt beside one of the units, his hand hovering over the translucent shell. A faint, rhythmic pulse emanated from within, accompanied by a unique energy signature that tickled at the edge of his senses. It wasn't mechanical, not entirely. It felt biological. He called Thea. "I'm in the medical bay. There's an energy signature here, something I haven't seen before. Can you run a scan?" A moment later, her voice crackled over the comm. "That's a bio-regenerative field, Ryan, advanced Cathar tech. They use it to accelerate healing, prolong life, even revive the critically wounded." Ryan frowned. "So it's like a supercharged healing system." "More than that," Thea replied, her voice tinged with a hint of dread. "They're ships. They aren't just powered by the core, Ryan. They're dependent on this field. It's integrated into their life support. It's everything to them." An idea, cold and calculating, formed in Ryan's mind. What if we could disrupt it, not destroy it, but weaken it, recalibrate the core to emit a frequency that interferes with the field? The silence on the other end was heavy. Finally, Thea spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You're suggesting we slowly weaken them, inflict suffering?" Ryan sighed. "It's not ideal, Thea, but it's better than a full-scale assault. It's better than letting them regroup and come back with reinforcements. We can strand them, weaken them enough to be less of a threat." "It's cruel," she said, the word filled with disgust. "Necessary," Ryan countered, his voice firm. "We do what we have to do to protect the Talaxians, to protect anyone else they might attack." Thea didn't respond for a long moment. "All right," she said finally, her voice resigned. "I'll recalibrate the core, but I don't like this, Ryan, not one bit." They worked in silence, their movements precise and efficient. Ryan, his hand steady, adjusted the core's energy output, targeting the specific frequency that resonated with the bio-regenerative field. Thea monitored the readings, her face etched with a mixture of persistence and unease. Suddenly, an alarm blared, cutting through the tense silence. A new compartment, hidden deep within the core, had been revealed. Inside, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, was a stasis pod. Ryan and Thea exchanged a look of stunned disbelief. Thea reached for the release mechanism, her hand trembling slightly. With a hiss of escaping gas, the pod opened. Inside, curled in a fetal position, was a child, a Talaxian child, seemingly unharmed. Thea gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached into the pod, gently lifting the child into her arms. Around the child's neck, a delicate chain held a small, intricately carved pendant, a family heirloom. It's Lyra," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "My cousin's daughter, she was lost during the attack on Talax Prime." Ryan stepped closer, his mind racing. "The Cathar, they captured Talaxians, experimented on them. It's the only explanation," Thea said, her voice trembling with rage. "They must have been trying to adapt the bio-regenerative field for their own use." Driven by a sudden surge of maternal instinct and a renewed sense of purpose, Thea clutched the child tighter. "I'm going to save her, Ryan. I'm going to stop them. I swear it." Just then the ship's sensors blared a warning, an energy surge detected from the escaping Cathar ships. "They detected the sabotage," Ryan said grimly. "They're rerouting their course. They're coming back." He turned to Thea, his expression grim. "We have a choice to make. Do we complete the recalibration of the core, weakening the entire Cathar fleet? Or do we focus on rescuing Lyra and getting out of here? As if on cue, the child in Thea's arms began to cough, a racking, painful sound. Thea quickly scanned her with a handheld device. Her eyes widened in horror. Her regenerative field. It's being deliberately suppressed, Ryan. They're doing something to her. Thea's voice was imbued with terror. They'll be back, Ryan. They need her. The Cathar will do anything to get her back, even destroy the station. Thea's hands, nimble despite the tremor that ran through her frame, worked furiously. Scavenged power conduits, ripped from the station's failing lighting grid, snaked across the floor, feeding into a jury-rigged regenerative field shimmering weakly around the Talaxian child. The kid's breathing remained shallow, ragged. Each inhale was a strained, whistling rasp. The makeshift field pulsed erratically, its pale blue light reflecting in Thea's sweat-streaked face. It bought them time, precious little of it, but time nonetheless. "We need to move," Ryan said, his voice low, urgent. He tapped at a holographic display pulled from a deactivated Cathar workstation, its interface flickering with static. "I found a maintenance tunnel, rarely used. The schematics are buried deep in the station's database. Looks like our best bet." The tunnel entrance was tucked away behind a stack of deactivated energy cells, the air thick with the metallic tang of decay. As they approached, the unmistakable hum of Cathar weaponry vibrated through the deck plating. Two Cathar soldiers clad in their chitinous armor stood guard, their energy rifles held at the ready. "We don't have time for this," Thea hissed, her hand instinctively moving towards the energy pistol strapped to her thigh. Ryan shook his head. "Wait." He reached into his medical kit, pulling out a small, metallic cylinder. Repurposed epinephrine ampoules, some focusing lenses from a discarded scanner, and a little human ingenuity. He activated the device with a click. A blinding flash of light erupted from the cylinder, followed by a high-pitched whine. The Cathar soldiers staggered back, their multifaceted eyes wide with confusion and pain. The disorientation was momentary, but it was enough. Ryan tackled one soldier, disarming him with a brutal efficiency that belied his doctor's demeanor. Thea dispatched the other with a swift burst from her pistol. They dragged the bodies behind the energy cell stack, concealing them from casual observation. The maintenance tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare. Twisted conduits snaked across the low ceiling, forcing them to crawl in places. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ozone. The deck plating was slick with grime, each step a precarious balancing act. The child's breathing grew more labored. Ryan stopped, kneeling beside her. Her skin was clammy, her pulse weak. He pulled out a medkit, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Her cellular regeneration is failing. I need to administer a stimulant, but it's risky. The dosage has to be precise." Thea watched him, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Do it. We don't have a choice." Ryan carefully injected a small amount of the stimulant into the child's arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the child gasped, her eyes fluttering open. Her breathing became slightly more regular. "We're not alone," Thea whispered, her eyes scanning the tunnel. "I'm detecting faint energy signatures, Cathar surveillance drones." They moved forward, their steps measured, their senses on high alert. The silence was broken only by the drip, drip, drip of condensation and the child's shallow breaths. Rounding a bend in the tunnel, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. Inside, rows of stasis pods lined the walls. Each pod contained a Talaxian, their bodies emaciated, their eyes vacant. Wires and tubes snaked from the pods, feeding into a complex network of machinery. Thea gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What are they doing?" Ryan approached one of the pods, examining the control panel. "Experimentation, genetic manipulation. They're trying to weaponize something from their DNA." A holographic schematic flickered to life on a nearby console. It depicted the station's layout, highlighting a secondary escape pod launch bay. "There," Ryan said, pointing to the schematic. Another chance, but it's on the other side of the station. As they emerged from the research lab, a volley of energy fire ripped through the tunnel. A squad of Cathar soldiers led by a heavily armored commander stood blocking their path. The primitives are proving more resilient than anticipated, the commander growled, his voice distorted by his helmet's vocoder. Eliminate them. Ryan shoved Thea and the child behind a stack of crates. Go, I'll hold them off. He grabbed a length of conduit from the tunnel wall, swinging it like a club. Thea hesitated, her eyes filled with doubt. Go, Ryan roared. Now, Thea nodded, grabbing the child and scrambling towards the secondary launch bay. Ryan charged, slamming the conduit into the lead Cathar soldier, knocking him off his feet. He dodged a blast of energy fire, diving behind another stack of crates. He pulled a handful of small metallic spheres from his medical kit. Time for a little guerrilla warfare. He tossed the spheres into the tunnel. They detonated with a series of concussive blasts, sending shrapnel flying. The Cathar soldiers scattered, disoriented. Thea's voice crackled over the comm. Ryan, we're almost there, but I can't reroute the power without the core recalibration. Ryan fought his way through the tunnel, his body aching, his breath ragged. He reached Thea and the child just as the Cathar commander rounded the corner. No, Ryan said, his voice firm. We're not doing it. We're not condemning an entire species. But what about the others? Thea pleaded. What about the Talaxians they're experimenting on? We have to stop them. We will, Ryan said. But we'll find another way. The Cathar commander raised his energy rifle. Your defiance ends here. Ryan, in a desperate move, ripped a panel off a nearby power generator. Wires sparked and crackled. This station runs on unstable fusion. A little overload, and boom. He slammed the panel back into place, initiating a self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared throughout the station. You fool, the commander roared. You'll doom us all. Ryan ignored him, grabbing Thea and the child and sprinting towards the launch bay. The tunnel shook violently as the generator began to overload. They reached the launch bay, only to find that the escape pods were heavily damaged. Wires hung loose, panels were cracked, and the launch mechanisms were sparking. We have to fix them, Thea said, her voice filled with despair. There's no other way. As they worked frantically to repair the pods, the Cathar commander burst into the launch bay, his armor scorched, his eyes burning with rage. You cannot escape justice, he bellowed. Ryan stepped in front of Thea and the child, his fists clenched. I'm all you've got to worry about. Thea, ignoring the battle about to unfold, worked feverishly, rerouting power conduits and splicing wires. She managed to bypass several safety interlocks, a dangerous maneuver but one that might just get them out of here. Just as the Cathar commander lunged at Ryan, Thea slammed the final connection into place. The escape pod hissed, life support flickering online. But as the launch sequence initiated, the Cathar commander, with a final desperate act, ripped a crucial cable from the launch mechanism. Sparks flew, and the launch sequence sputtered to a halt. The station groaned around them, the self-destruct countdown ticking away. The Cathar commander stood between them and freedom, his energy rifle trained on Ryan. The escape pod, their only hope, lay dormant. The child whimpered, clutching Thea's leg. Their fate hung precariously in the balance. Ryan moved with a speed born of instinct and training. The Cathar commander, a hulking figure with eyes burning with desperation, lunged with a vibro blade. Ryan sidestepped the attack, his hand a blur as he snatched a surgical laser from his belt. He didn't fire. Instead, he used the laser's metallic body to deliver a precise strike to the commander's wrist, disarming him without lethal force. The blade clattered on the metal floor. Ryan stepped back, hands raised, a silent plea for calm. Thea watched from the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. She saw not a monster but a reflection of her own pain, the same desperation that had driven her people to the brink. Wait, she called, her voice strained. She rushed to the damaged launch mechanism, her fingers flying across the ruined console. The launch. It's damaged beyond automated repair. I can reroute power for a manual override, but it's incredibly unstable. The operator would have to remain behind at point-blank range during the launch. High risk. Ryan turned, his gaze meeting Thea's. Thea, no, we'll find another way. Thea shook her head, her scarred face resolute. There isn't time, my calculations are precise. You pilot the pod, I initiate the launch. Ryan stepped forward, grabbing her arm gently. Not a chance. I trust your calculations, Thea, but I'm not leaving you behind. He looked at the panel, his mind racing. There has to be a way. He looked back at the Cathar commander, who was now sitting on the floor, head in his hands. Ryan made his decision. I'll do it. He turned back to Thea. Show me what to do. Thea, her eyes shining with unshed tears, quickly explained the manual override procedure. Ryan listened intently, his mind absorbing the complex instructions. He trusted her. He had to. He positioned himself at the console, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Ready, he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Thea nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she initiated the sequence. The escape pod shuddered, alarms blaring as the launch mechanism engaged. Ryan slammed his hand down on the activation switch, bracing for the explosion. The pod lurched forward, tearing through the debris field with surprising agility. Ryan expertly piloted the damaged craft, dodging flaming wreckage and avoiding the few remaining Cathar fire. He pushed the engines to their limit, his every sense focused on the task at hand. As they sped away from the station, Thea worked frantically at the ship's computer. Ryan, I've found something, she said, her voice tight with urgency. Old data files. The Cathar homeworld. It's dying, a chain reaction of resource exploitation. They're not just attacking us, they're desperate. They escaped the immediate danger, drifting in the void, the ruined station a distant memory. Thea looked at Ryan, her face etched with concern. What do we do? Leave them to their fate? Ryan stared out at the stars, his mind wrestling with the implications of Thea's discovery. We can't just abandon them, but what can we do? We're just two people. There's the escape pod's energy cell, Ryan said slowly. It's advanced, powerful, we could modify it. Use it to temporarily stabilize their planet's atmosphere, buy them time to develop a long-term solution. Thea's eyes widened. It's insane, incredibly risky, but it might work. Thea, fueled by renewed purpose, worked tirelessly, rerouting circuits and recalibrating frequencies. I can modify the energy cell into a makeshift atmospheric shield, she announced, wiping sweat from her brow. It's a long shot, but it's the best we can do. They landed on the Cathar planet, the air thick with pollution and despair. The population, gaunt and desperate, met them with hostility. Ryan stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. We're here to help, he said, his voice amplified by the pod's comm system. We know what's happening to your planet. We can help you stabilize the atmosphere. The Cathar, initially skeptical, listened as Ryan and Thea explained their plan. They saw the sincerity in their eyes, the genuine desire to help. Hesitantly, they agreed to cooperate. The atmospheric shield flickered to life, a shimmering dome of energy enveloping the dying planet. The effect was immediate. The air began to clear, the sun peeked through the smog, and a collective gasp of hope rose from the Cathar population. Months later, the landscape of the Cathar planet was slowly transforming. Ryan and Thea worked side by side, teaching sustainable farming techniques and renewable energy practices. The Talaxians, having established a new colony nearby, sent engineers and scientists to assist in the reconstruction effort. Ryan watched as Cathar children planted new crops, their faces filled with hope. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known since that fateful mission years ago. He was no longer running from his past, he was building a future. Thea stood beside him, her gaze following his. We did it, Ryan, she said softly. We actually did it. As they oversaw the combined reconstruction efforts, Thea turned to Ryan, her voice filled with awe. "I've been thinking. Why did only humanity answer our plea? So many other species have the technology, the resources." She paused, then continued, "It's because you're the only ones who could ignore the risks, the only ones who would put others first, even when it meant sacrificing everything." Ryan smiled, taking Thea's hand in his. In the distance, they saw children from both species playing together in a field, their laughter echoing across the revitalized landscape. The sun